Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. I'm a 37-year-old guy originally from Europe, married to a 35-year-old American woman. We've been together for about 11 years, married for 9, and we have 2 kids together, a boy, 6, and a girl, 8. On the outside, we looked like a picture-perfect little family. But the truth is, I've been ignoring little red flags for years, brushing them off because I thought love was enough to make things work. My wife, let's call her Melissa, is smart, quick-witted, and honestly, sometimes too sharp for her own good. She has this way of twisting conversations, of making me feel like I'm overreacting whenever I bring up concerns. You know the type. If you catch her in a small lie, she'll laugh it off, call you paranoid, then somehow pivot into making you feel guilty for even questioning her. I first noticed things weren't right maybe 4 years ago. She'd get random late-night texts, usually brushed off as a friend venting. She'd suddenly have work meetings that didn't make much sense, like on weekends, at coffee shops, like without her laptop. When I asked why she was so secretive with her phone, she'd roll her eyes and say, "You're European. You don't get how American friendships work." And here's the kicker. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because at the end of the day, I loved her, I loved our kids, and the last thing I wanted was to dig for problems and ruin everything. So I stayed quiet, convincing myself I was just being insecure. But deep down, something always felt off. And as much as I tried to ignore it, the truth has a way of clawing itself to the surface. So, fast forward to a few months ago. I've always been interested in family history. My dad back in Europe used to tell me stories about our ancestors, and I thought it'd be cool to do one of those genealogical DNA kits. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about infidelity at all. It was just supposed to be a fun family project. I ordered kits for myself and the kids, thinking we could see if they picked up more of my side or Melissa's side. We did the swabs together at the kitchen table. My son thought it was hilarious spitting into a tube, and my daughter kept asking if she'd find out if she was secretly a princess. Melissa rolled her eyes and joked that I was turning the kids into science experiments. But she played along. A few weeks later, the results came in. I remember sitting down with my laptop, excited, almost like a kid at Christmas. My results popped up first. No surprises, mostly European, lots of detail about my heritage. Then I clicked on my daughter's profile. That's when the air left the room. It said clear as day. No genetic relation to the tested father. I thought it was a glitch. I literally refreshed the page, closed the browser, reopened it. But then I checked my son's profile. Same message, no relation. Both of them. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely move the mouse. I double-checked everything. Did I mess up the test? Did I mix up the kits? I went down every possible rabbit hole to try and explain it away, but there it was in bold letters. I wasn't the biological father of either of my kids. For a good 20 minutes, I just sat there staring at the screen, numb. Then came the rush of emotions. Anger, confusion, disbelief, heartbreak, all at once. I swear I felt like my whole life had just been a movie, and someone had ripped down the set to show me it was all fake. And that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything in my head. The little lies, the late night friends, the dismissive attitude whenever I'd question her. Suddenly, all of it lined up like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep it inside. I waited until the kids were at school, then told Melissa we needed to talk. She walked into the living room with her coffee, already rolling her eyes like I was about to nag her about bills or chores. I didn't dance around it. I just said, "Melissa, I did a DNA test with the kids. It says they're not mine. Do you want to explain that?" Her reaction? She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a shocked laugh. A mean, sharp laugh. Then she took a sip of her coffee and said, "You actually did one of those dumb tests? God, you're so gullible." I couldn't believe it. I pressed her, told her the results didn't lie. She rolled her eyes and muttered, Those things aren't even accurate. You probably messed it up. When I wouldn't let it go, she finally snapped and said, Fine. Maybe they're not biologically yours, but you're still their dad. So what difference does it make? That line hit me like a brick. I asked her straight up, So who is the father? And she just smirked and said, Does it really matter? You've been the one raising them. Biology doesn't change that. I was shaking with anger, trying not to scream. She got defensive, accused me of digging for problems and ruining our marriage over nothing. When I asked her again who the real father was, she dodged the question, said things like, It's complicated, or I don't even know for sure. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some one night mistake. This was years of lies, years of her playing me for a fool. And the worst part? She acted like I was the problem for finding out. After that confrontation, things went downhill fast. Melissa switched gears from defensive to manipulative like she was flipping a switch. First, she tried guilt-tripping me. Do you really want to blow up the kids' lives over something as stupid as DNA? You're their dad in every way that matters. When that didn't work, she got mean. You think anyone else would put up with your boring ass? You should be grateful I even stayed with you this long. That one stung. Then came the lies. So many lies I couldn't keep track. One minute she claimed it was just one guy, a mistake before we got married. The next, she said she wasn't even sure who the fathers were. Later that same day, she flipped again and insisted both kids probably had the same father, some old friend of hers from work. Every time I asked for clarity, she'd either blow up at me or suddenly act like the victim. I only cheated because you were so distant. Or, if you'd been more attentive, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. The gaslighting was unreal. She even accused me of setting her up, like I had tricked her with the DNA test just to trap her in a lie. At one point she said, What are you going to do, huh? Abandon the kids you've been raising for 8 years? You'll look like the bad guy, not me. And the horrible thing was, she wasn't completely wrong. As furious as I was at her, I kept looking at the pictures of my kids on the wall and thinking, they're still my babies. I tucked them in last night. I held them when they were sick. How do I just walk away? But at the same time, every time I looked at Melissa, I felt sick. My whole marriage felt like a scam I'd signed up for without reading the fine print. I realized then, whatever came next wasn't just about betrayal. It was going to be about survival. After that talk, I felt like I was living in some twisted alternate reality. I'd go through the motions, drop the kids at school, show up for work, but inside I was falling apart. At first it was pure anger. I'd lie awake at night, clenching my jaw, fantasizing about exposing Melissa to everyone. Her family, our friends, blasting her on Facebook, hell, even showing up at her work to tell the guy she was sneaking around with. If I could even figure out who he was. The rage felt bottomless. But then came the sadness. The kind that hits you in waves so hard it takes your breath away. I'd hear my daughter laugh in the next room, and instead of feeling joy, I'd feel this gut-wrenching grief, like I'd lost her even though she was still right there. My son would climb onto my lap with a book, and my heart would break knowing the world says he isn't really mine. It wasn't just about Melissa cheating. It was about my entire identity being shattered. I'd built my life around being a husband and father, and suddenly both of those titles felt like lies. And the craziest part? I couldn't tell anyone. Who do you call for this? My family back in Europe? What do I even say? Hey, surprise, those grandkids you adore aren't actually yours. My friends here? Most of them were through Melissa, and I didn't trust any of them not to run straight to her. So I kept it bottled in. Smiling for the kids, playing the part of the steady dad while inside I was cracking in half. One night, when Melissa fell asleep on the couch, I just sat there staring at her. This woman I once thought was my soulmate. Sharp-tongued, yes, but funny, exciting, alive. Looked like a stranger. And all I could think was, How long has she been laughing at me behind my back? I realized then, whatever came next, I had to start making decisions. Because if I didn't, she was going to keep controlling the narrative, and I was done being her fool. After weeks of feeling like I was drowning in my own head, I realized I couldn't just sit there and let Melissa dictate my reality. She was too good at spinning things, too good at twisting words. If I didn't take control, she'd bury me under her lies and somehow make me the villain. So I started planning. Quietly. First step, I printed out all the DNA test results, not just on my laptop, hard copies. I tucked them away in a folder I kept hidden at work. If Melissa got wind of it, I knew she'd accidentally delete or destroy whatever proof I had. Second, I began documenting. Dates she came home late, weird excuses she gave, texts that didn't add up, even her reactions during our confrontation. I felt insane doing it, but I knew that if this ever went to divorce court, she'd try to paint me as the unstable husband, and I needed hard evidence. Third, I called a lawyer, not to file anything, yet, but just to understand my options. That phone call was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The lawyer was calm, professional, but when I explained that both kids weren't biologically mine, there was a pause. He told me something I didn't expect. In many states, if you've acted as the legal father for years, the court doesn't care about DNA. You're still on the hook for child support. That felt like a punch to the gut. Not only had she lied and cheated for years, but now I could be financially shackled to her lies for the rest of my life. But here's the twist. When I asked the lawyer what my chances were of fighting it, he said, "It depends if you want custody. Judges don't like ripping kids away from the only dad they know." That broke me. Because as much as I hated Melissa, I couldn't stomach the thought of losing the kids. Biology or not, they're my world. So right there, I made my first big decision. I was going to protect them no matter what. Even if that meant playing a longer game with Melissa. Melissa isn't stupid. Sharp-tongued, manipulative, sure. But definitely not stupid. She could sense I was pulling away even though I was trying to keep things normal for the kids. I stopped laughing at her jokes. I stopped engaging in her little arguments. I started sleeping on the far edge of the bed. She noticed, and instead of apologizing or coming clean, she doubled down. Suddenly, she was being extra affectionate in front of the kids, hugging me randomly, calling me babe, making sure little eyes saw us happy. It felt staged, and it made my skin crawl. Then she tried the seduction angle. Out of nowhere, she'd come to bed in lingerie, something she hadn't bothered with in years. Whispering in my ear, touching me like nothing had happened. When I didn't exactly jump at the chance, she pouted and said, "Wow, so now I'm the one being rejected?" But the real kicker came a week later. She sat me down at the kitchen table, all serious, and said, "Listen, I know you've been acting weird. If this is about the DNA stuff, I already told you those tests can't be trusted. But even if they're right, you can't just abandon us. The kids need stability. And if you try to leave, I'll make sure everyone knows you walked out on them." Do you really want to be the guy who deserts his family? It wasn't a plea. It was a threat. That's when it hit me. She wasn't trying to save our marriage. She was locking me in. She wanted control, leverage, to keep me trapped in her web. And the worst part? She was willing to weaponize the kids to do it. I held it together for as long as I could, but there was one night when everything snapped. Melissa had been on her phone all evening, giggling at texts she wouldn't let me see. When I asked who it was, she shot me that trademark smirk and said, "Relax, it's just a friend. Don't get jealous." Something inside me broke. I'd swallowed her lies, her gaslighting, her manipulation for too long. I slammed my hand on the table so hard the glass of water tipped over. The kids were asleep upstairs, but I didn't care anymore. I was done playing her game. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I know you've been cheating for years. I know the kids aren't mine. I've got proof, Melissa. DNA doesn't lie. And you're not going to threaten me with being a bad father when you're the one who built this entire marriage on lies." For once, she didn't have a comeback ready. She just sat there, stunned. Then, like clockwork, she flipped the switch. Her voice rising, her hands waving, spitting out venom. Oh, here we go, poor little victim. You think you're some saint? Newsflash, you're not. You were boring, predictable, and weak. I needed more, and you weren't man enough to give it to me. That cut deep, but I didn't back down this time. I said, then why didn't you leave me? Why build a life on lies? Her answer? Because you were useful. You paid the bills. You played daddy. And honestly, I didn't think you'd ever have the balls to question it. That was it. The mask dropped completely. No more excuses, no more fake affection. She laid it all out like it was just business. I walked out that night, didn't go far, just sat in my car in the driveway for hours, gripping the steering wheel, shaking, trying to process what she'd just admitted. But that was the moment I knew. There was no saving this. No more denial. The marriage was dead. After the breaking point, I tried to keep things civil for the kids, but Melissa didn't waste time dragging them into the mess. It started small. I'd hear her whispering to them when she thought I wasn't listening. Little comments like, Daddy's upset with mommy, but that's not your fault. Or, sometimes daddy doesn't understand how much mommy loves you. Then it got worse. One morning, my daughter asked me, Daddy, are you going to leave us? My heart shattered. She's only 8. Where would she get that idea? I glanced at Melissa and she just raised her eyebrows, sipping her coffee like she hadn't just planted that seed. My son followed a few days later. He crawled onto my lap and whispered, Mommy said you don't love us anymore. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I hugged him tight, told him it wasn't true, but the damage was already done. Melissa was turning them against me, subtly, insidiously. If I got upset, she'd tell the kids, See? Daddy's angry again. If I tried to explain the truth, she'd swoop in and say, Don't worry, Daddy's just confused. The kids started looking at me differently. Not with fear exactly, but with uncertainty. Like they didn't know who to trust. And that killed me, because all I've ever wanted was to be their safe place. It became clear that Melissa wasn't just fighting me, she was weaponizing the children to secure her control. And in that moment, I realized the battle wasn't about our marriage anymore. It was about protecting my kids from her lies. Up until this point, Melissa had been cagey about who the biological father or fathers actually were. Every time I pressed, she'd dodge with some vague line like, it doesn't matter, or that's none of your concern. But one night, after a particularly nasty argument, she slipped. I was in the living room, and she stormed in from the kitchen yelling, Why can't you just let this go? He doesn't even want to be involved. I froze. Singular. I pushed her. So there's one guy? One man who fathered both kids? Her face gave her away before her mouth did. She tried to backpedal, stammering, You don't know what you're talking about. But the more I pressed, the clearer it became. The biological father wasn't some random fling or coworker. He was someone close, someone she'd kept in our orbit. And then, like a sick light bulb flicking on, it hit me. Melissa's friend from her office, the one who always texted late at night, the one she swore was like a brother, the one who mysteriously showed up at birthday parties and barbecues even though I never invited him. I asked her straight up, Is it Ryan? Not his real name. She went pale. Didn't deny it. Just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed together like a kid caught stealing. That silence told me everything. Ryan wasn't just her affair partner. He was the father of both my kids. And the worst part? He knew. He'd been around, watching me raise his children, letting me play the fool for nearly a decade. The betrayal doubled in weight. It wasn't just Melissa anymore. It was a conspiracy. 2 people I knew smiling in my face, all while they were stabbing me in the back. And in that moment, I realized the fight ahead of me was going to be darker and nastier than I'd ever imagined. After discovering Ryan was the biological father, I didn't just feel betrayed, I felt completely unmoored. My entire life had been a lie, and suddenly every memory, every laugh, every bedtime story felt like it had been stolen from me. I started questioning everything about myself. Was I so uninteresting, so predictable, so replaceable that Melissa would risk everything for someone else? I replayed every interaction, every argument, every moment I'd brushed off as her being quirky or difficult. I saw them all in a new light. Clues I'd ignored, little cracks in the facade I thought was solid. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake imagining Ryan smiling while I changed diapers, held sick kids, and tucked them into bed. I imagined Melissa whispering his name when I wasn't around. Every happy memory turned sour. Every laugh with the kids felt tinged with guilt, like I was enjoying someone else's family by accident. I oscillated between rage and despair. Sometimes I wanted to storm over to Ryan's apartment and demand answers. Other times I wanted to lock myself in a room for weeks, hiding from the world, hiding from the children I loved more than anything. I couldn't talk to anyone. Telling friends or family felt like shattering the illusion of my life even more. And yet, keeping it in felt like poisoning myself from the inside out. The hardest part? The kids. They were innocent, unaware, and completely dependent on me. They loved me as their dad, and I couldn't let my heartbreak ruin that. I had to somehow separate my feelings from my responsibilities, a line so thin I felt like I was walking on a razor. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a strange clarity emerged. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo Melissa's betrayal or force Ryan to care. But I could decide what kind of father I wanted to be from this point forward. After weeks of spinning in circles, I finally realized I needed a strategy. This wasn't just about revenge or venting, it was about protecting my kids and reclaiming my life. I needed to act smart, not just emotionally. Step 1. Boundaries. I decided to minimize contact with Melissa. No more late night arguments, no more trying to reason with someone who wasn't capable of honesty. I'd still co parent, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. Step 2. Legal groundwork. I scheduled meetings with my lawyer again. This time, I brought the DNA results, documented evidence, and records of all suspicious behavior I could prove. I wanted to understand my rights, particularly around custody and visitation. I had to ensure the kids' lives remained stable no matter what drama Melissa tried to throw. Step 3. Protect the kids emotionally. I decided I would shield them from the truth, at least for now. They needed their dad, not the fallout from adult betrayals. I focused on keeping routines, bedtime stories, school drop-offs, and weekend adventures consistent. I wanted them to feel safe, loved, and secure. Step 4. Regain control of my life. I started reclaiming small things. My evenings, my hobbies, my friendships. I knew that if I let myself sink entirely into anger and heartbreak, I'd lose the very parts of my life worth saving. Finally, step 5. Face Melissa directly. I couldn't just simmer in silence forever. I had to make her understand that the game was over, that I wasn't her pawn anymore, and that my primary concern would always be the kids. By the end of that week, I had a plan, a sense of direction, and most importantly, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about taking back my life. I knew the final showdown with Melissa couldn't be casual. It had to be direct, calm, and unwavering. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I asked her to sit down. This time, I wasn't shaking, I wasn't pleading. I was clear and controlled. I laid everything out. The DNA results, her lies over the years, her manipulation, and the fact that I knew Ryan was the father. I told her point blank, I'm done being your fool. I'm done letting you use me and the kids. This ends now. She tried her usual tricks, sharp words, guilt trips, sarcastic smirks, but I didn't flinch. I calmly explained the legal steps I was taking to protect myself and the children. I made it clear I wasn't seeking revenge, but I would enforce boundaries, custody rights, and transparency in co-parenting. Melissa's smirk faded. She realized I was no longer afraid, no longer manipulable. For the first time in years, she seemed uncertain. She tried one last argument. But if I lose you, what about the kids? I looked her in the eyes and said, I'm not leaving the kids. They'll always have a dad. But they're better off with honesty than a house built on lies. If you want to be in their lives, it's on truthful terms or not at all. The room went silent. No theatrics, no gaslighting, just a long, heavy silence. And in that silence, I finally felt a flicker of peace. The weeks after the confrontation were strange, quiet, tense, but also oddly freeing. Melissa sulked, made snide comments, tried minor manipulations, but I held my ground. I had set boundaries, and I wasn't crossing them. Most importantly, I focused on the kids. I made our routines sacred. School mornings, homework, weekend trips, bedtime stories. I talked to them about honesty, kindness, and love, without dragging Melissa into it. I wanted them to feel safe and secure, not caught in a war between adults. I also started therapy. Not just for myself, but to navigate this new reality with perspective. It helped me untangle guilt from betrayal, sadness from anger, and fear from hope. I realized I had been blaming myself for her choices far too long. And slowly the kids began to adjust. My daughter hugged me tighter at night. My son started climbing into my lap again without fear. They didn't need to know all the details, and frankly, they didn't deserve to. They just needed to know I loved them unconditionally and that I was staying. Melissa remained in the picture, but only on my terms. Co-parenting became a structured negotiation rather than an emotional battlefield. I'd learned to anticipate her manipulations and diffuse them calmly. And every time I saw the kids laughing, genuinely happy, I felt a flicker of hope that despite everything, some good could survive this mess. I was finally reclaiming my life, not as a victim, but as a dad, a man, and someone who refused to be fooled again. Looking back, I can't say this story has a happy ending in the fairy tale sense. Melissa isn't gone, Ryan isn't accountable, and the truth about the kids' biology will never change. But I've learned a few things that are worth sharing. Trust your instincts. Those little red flags I ignored for years, they were real. Don't let love blind you to obvious signs of deceit. Evidence matters. When dealing with manipulation, lies, and betrayal, having concrete proof, documents, messages, tests, can protect you legally and emotionally. Boundaries are everything. You can't control other people, but you can control how much power they have over your life. Standing firm doesn't make you cruel. It makes you sane. Protect the kids. Regardless of biology, if you've raised them, they are your children. Shield them from adult conflicts when possible, but stay present, loving, and consistent. Healing takes time. There's no shortcut from heartbreak to peace. Therapy, honest friends, and self-care are crucial. You have to rebuild yourself from the inside out. You are not your spouse's choices. Her betrayal doesn't define you, and it doesn't diminish the love and care you gave. You were a good father and a good husband, even if she didn't appreciate it. To anyone going through something similar, it's devastating, it's painful, but it is survivable. You can reclaim your life, protect your children, and eventually find peace. It may not look like the life you imagined, but it can still be worth living. And for me, I've realized that even after betrayal and even after heartbreak, I still have the power to love, to nurture, and to choose honesty and integrity over lies. That's something nobody can ever take away from me.